Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here with the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this podcast is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Jon LoDuca. Hi, Jon.
Hello. Good to see you, Adi.
Good to see you too. And Jon, you are a returning guest because our first episode was so popular. And we decided it's time to do another one to be to continue the conversation, right? To continue the conversation about processes and procedures. Because you are the founder of PlaybookBuilder, which is a process implementation software, right? Did I say it correctly now in terms of it's not just optimization, it is implementation, because PlaybookBuilder, it's a platform where you can document your SOPs, your processes and procedures, but not just document it. It's actually bringing them to life, right? Because you can use videos and you can put it in such a way that is very interesting, very aesthetic, very appealing, so people will actually go there and use it. So you have the content, and we have mutual clients where we use your platform, we document their processes, and we get this amazing product of them having the SOPs there. But the systems does so much more, because it is a way of actually making sure that those processes are being followed by all, by actually controlling the communication, seeing who goes in when, testing. When you review the SOPs, you can go back and send it to everyone. You can actually do email campaigns. So as the HR person or the person in charge of the operations, you can actually send out the SOPs to remind the group that, hey, it's time to review, or this and this is not being done, please review, etc. So, obviously the best way for our listeners to actually find out what it is to go to playbookbuilder.com and actually find and sign up for the demonstration so they can see it. But is there anything that I missed in terms of that you would like to talk about the platform itself, in terms of why it is a process implementation software?
Yeah, you said it beautifully. And honestly, I couldn't agree with what you said more. There is no return on investment for documenting process. It all is in the implementation and the utilization. The only way to move the needle or drive a KPI or a scorecard is if the team are actually actively using them. And so we thought we were really smart when we first built the software in 2009. We thought, this is so great. It has video and it's beautiful and it's easy, and we'll be able to really change the world by putting processes in the cloud. And it didn't. It didn't really move the needle. And until we got serious about driving utilization, the communications piece, we talked about texting and emailing and automating all of that, giving there, no excuse for people to find the platform and be reminded of the platform, even when the administrator on the software is forgotten. PlaybookBuilder is still reaching out to the users and saying, hey, get in here. But that and the reporting, and those two things have really made a big difference. But yeah, you articulated it beautifully, and it's awfully fun because process is the wheel that drives a business. It's often neglected, but it's so critical. You and I could talk about that all day.
We can, and we'll probably do another podcast and talk about that. But I actually have specific questions I want to ask you in terms of, we're going to discuss today why business owners, entrepreneurs put off writing processes. It's kind of like the elephant in the room, right? The processes are important. Business owners know that. Entrepreneurs know that. When I talk to them, they say, yes, I know it's important, right? It's important. I know it's important, but why are we doing it? And I think once you actually put it out there, the reason why it's not being done, or the reason why people are not moving forward with it, I think that will be easy to identify and then do something about it. But before we jump into it, I really would love for you to give a short bio of because you are You used to do basically what we do, like a process consultant, and a very, very successful at that. So you've seen businesses, you've worked with businesses, you know it in and out. So I would love to hear about your background so our listeners can hear it as well. And then we'll jump into why processes are basically not being documented on a regular basis.
Yeah. Well, I think my background on it will probably surprise some of the listeners who go, oh, he's a process guy. I was trying to drive top line for companies. And the way that I found that I could help them is that by documenting their sales process and using that as a marketing tool. And so for a company that's highly commoditized, there's not a lot of differentiation, right? There's not product differentiation. There's not pricing differentiation. So I was digging around trying to find out, well, what makes this guy so much better than the guy across the street? Or why is this woman crushing it in comparison to the average in her industry? And it was in the little things. It was in the unique experience. So I set about building a company to capture that wisdom in the organization and turn it into a thing, turn it into a tangible. So they could talk about it, name it, trademark it, bring it to market as a differentiator. Like, yeah, you're right. We do the same thing a guy across the street does, but we have this unique approach for doing it that makes it very, very different. The outcomes are way better. We get, whatever kind of a outcome they'd articulate. And that led me into the guts of operations and looking at process throughout. And it was an incredible opportunity because we were just trying to drive sales, which is the backbone of the organization. That's the oxygen tank. That's the centerpiece. But everything that grows out of it, those are all processes too. And when we started to pull back the layers, what do you think we found? We found businesses don't get to this. They have a weird relationship to it. Some do. And we often, in the small business arena, we don't see those businesses because they don't stay small for long. Businesses that have documented processes either get bought or they grow really fast and they stop being small businesses. It's the company reinventing the wheel every Monday morning. Those are the companies, that are little companies, and they deal with chaos and complexity. And so, I was dealing with small business, very successful small business, top 0.25% income earners, but they were so small, they didn't have the bench strength and they didn't have the resources. And they said, well, we'll get to process later. And so that's where I came in. And because I was driving top line, I got the visionaries in the room. As opposed to just solely working with operations-minded folks, I was often dealing with the CEO or the founder and helping them break down why they win and what their genius was and how that led to the company's, success. But I enjoyed a really phenomenal career. We were the team that Dan Sullivan at Strategic Coach sent all their clients to do process work. And so Strategic Coach's clients are incredible. And I worked with close to 500 of Dan and Bab's clients over a 20-year period. So we were just busy in the guts of small businesses, trying to tease out why they win, help them package that. And then along the way realized, my gosh, if we could film them, we would have an incredible operating system. We'd have the how and the why, and that's where Playbook Builder took off, is we realized we could drive that messaging and that connection between an SOP and a story or an explanation throughout an organization and really change results. And that's the impetus. That was my my intern project. That was my being in the saddle for learning. And then when Playbook Builder took off, we just we kind of let Wisdom Link kind of go to the wayside. And so the consulting company kind of withered and Playbook Builder just took off. And so now it's my privilege to partner with folks like you because you understand what I'm trying to do. I understand what you're trying to do. And we built the software not in a vacuum, not in my mom's basement. I built it, doing essentially the kind of work you do. And so I think that's why you like it, is you see some of those things that we were trying to reduce friction. You see features in there and you go, oh, that was smart. Yeah, I can see why LoDuca and company built that into Playbook Builder because you've been in there, you've had those talks and understand those issues. Yeah,
absolutely. We're working right now on a mutual client that we build the SOPs, but what we are doing after we build the SOPs and put it in Playbook Builder, we are recording videos that are actually the best practices, right? Because that, as you said, can be conveyed only in voice. You can write an essay about it, but it's not the same. You need to really distill the important best practices and the policies that are so important that you want to hear it in the voice of the founder, in the voice of the chief operating officer. I mean, you can use AI, whatever you want in order to create those videos, but you have to listen to it. You have to understand, even listen to the passion behind it, right? The mannerism. So it just impinges more, because then it drives in that message, and then you know how important it is.
I read a statistic that for every, I think it was every 100 words of text on video, it was every minute of video, there are 1 million lines of information that you're consuming, of tonality and inflection and that passion you talk about, picking up on all kinds of other information than just the words that you're hearing. And so videos just become the de facto. It's the go-to. And for everybody younger than me, I'm Gen X, anybody younger than me, the phone is the first move. I say this all the time. If I was going to retile my bathroom, 10, 15 years ago, I would have gone to the library. Now I just go to YouTube. It's just, sure. Why in the world would you not? Right. The video is so much better. You have so much more information. You can watch the how-to while you're getting a funny story, and get the lessons and see everything done. And it's incredible. And the creativity of folks exploiting video nowadays, you're probably seeing this with the clients, GoPro videos and mock interview conversations and screen captures and on and on and on. It's so fun to see the things people come up with.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's very true. And
yeah.
We're going to talk about what's stopping people from documenting, right? What's stopping entrepreneurs. And one of the things, before we jump into like your sequence of what you have seen, I just wanted to bring it up to bridge it between one to another. The videos. So I've seen, what I noticed, and I want to know if it's true for you as well, is that sometimes, entrepreneurs or business owners or people that are documenting will say, well, I can't really record a video right now. It has to be perfect, right? So they think, okay, I need to hire a photographer, I need to hire a makeup artist, or I need to really write the script. And, and I tell them, just do it. Just do it, because don't wait for the perfection. And the beauty about a tool like PlaybookBuilder is that it's so easy to just record it from the phone, from the computer. You make it so easy, at least it's there, because it's better to have something there than to wait for that perfect moment. And then when you have time in the future, if you want to really hire actors or, whatever you want to do to make
it as good.
Right?
Won't be as good anyway. What we started to do was I grab a whiteboard, I'd map the process super high level, and I'd get basically out of it enough information to get a shot list. And instead of documenting in detail, I would interview them on camera. And by virtue of their having a conversation with me, their eyes off camera, they're not staring at the lens, they're just having a conversation, I could antagonize all kind of stuff out of them, because they'd stop giving like a lecture and they would just start having a conversation with me. And I'm not very bright, so I'd ask them the dumbest questions and they'd have to explain things to me like some knucklehead new hire. And all of a sudden, we're just having a conversation. They're explaining things to me. And that was the gold that we would get out of them, because once in a while, they would explain it and they'd tell me a story, or they would articulate a step-by-step in their head they didn't know they had. And then we could always watch the video later and go, heck, there's a script. He just said, well, when they say this, I say this, and then I explain that, and there's all the language you need. Or you look for 5 things, and they don't know they look for 5 things until they're having the conversation. And then all of a sudden, they realize it's 5 things. And so we would interview them first and then deconstruct the video's elements to create more of the assets to unpack the learning. But I think that most adults like learning in both ways. They like the reference that reading provides, skimming, scanning, looking for the thing you need. But video is just a rich mentorship portion, and it's loaded with information that sometimes just comes along for the ride. A story that gets you emotionally might be the reason you remember a detail in a procedure. Strange as that may sound, I always tell the story. My dad taught me how to change the oil while he told me the story of his truck breaking down in basic training. During Vietnam, he was like driving a truck. He was learning how to drive like a great big, huge truck. And he was in Yuma, Arizona in the middle of nowhere. It was like 130 degrees. Every time I change my oil, I remember that story. And so those things are linked for me. So we as learners, we can exploit things like video because it'll make stickier, more powerful learning. It's not just about, oh, it's more fun to consume it. It's also stickier. It also bakes that learning into the brain, and that makes it a really like valuable asset. So I always start with video and back my way into the other assets grudgingly. Like, all right, I'll write the whole SOP if I have to, but I don't want to start there because nobody wants to start there. No one feels like it's the fun part of the project. And ironically, like that's where they need like a brain to come in and help them sometimes because they get stuck there. But we made video easy. And as a world now where folks have iPhones and they have assets that they can make videos so conveniently, it's become a little less scary. It's become a little more like, yeah, sure, I can shoot a video. But the secret I found was interviewing them. Asking them to give us soliloquy is hard.
Absolutely.
Asking them,
and I agree with you.
Just
100%. So go ahead.
Yeah. I bet you do it on Zoom. Is that how you do it? You interview?
Yeah, I do it via Zoom, and I think the interview is what gives the ability to ask all these amazing questions. And, it's just like, as you said, like it's
so smart.
You're curious about, and you want to know, and how's that, and how's that. So they're basically training, like when I do it, they're training me. I track that, and then we clip the videos and we put it on PlaybookBuilder as an example, right? So, yeah.
So I love about you, and this is the difference between us, is you have a brain for engineering. And so I love that I was always skimming the surface. You could go all the way down into the small details and not lose your mind. And that's where I would get, I just would have to get oxygen. I couldn't go down that deep. And I appreciate that. I think that the work you're able to do is, I think, richer, deeper. I've seen the outputs of your efforts, and it's more robust. But I love that you're exploiting the Zoom attribute of that, because that gets you a twofer. You get the interview on camera and you get the details. Brilliant. Good for you.
Absolutely.
Smart.
All right, let's jump into our topic. So I want to know from your experience, let's really dissect why entrepreneurs, business owners, why do they put off writing processes? What if you had to choose the most common reasons that you have seen, what would those be?
I gave some thought to this as we were, discussing this last time, and it's been on my mind quite a little bit. I gave a talk at the EOS conference. The national conference was in Indianapolis a couple of weeks ago, and I was actually giving a talk about this in particular. And I said something I hadn't said before, and it really, I think, got to the heart of it, at least for a lot of the folks, because they came up and told me so, which was neat to hear. I said, the problem is this process piece is a business function like marketing and sales, but we don't look at it that way. We look at it as a project. And the crap that I hear is, we totally get it. We think this is super important. We've got a bunch of things going on right now. And as soon as we get through those, we're going to tackle process as though you would do sales like that. You know what? I'm really busy this week. I'm going to do sales next week or next month. And then we're just going to do sales. And then thankfully we'll be done with sales. And then we can go on with something else. It's like, no. Time out. You need to think about this as a business function that you would do all the time, that you would bake into your weekly routine, in fact. And so the paradigm, I think, is the biggest culprit. People don't know how to think about it, so they don't assign the resources or the time appropriate to do it. And more importantly, they think of it as a project with a deadline and an ending, instead of I've got to bake this into the routine of the business. There needs to be someone who does it. They need to be doing it all the time. And it's 2023. Everything's changing. So what I see happening, what stops folks is they think it's a project, so they kick the can. Well, we'll do it when this is done or whenever this is done. And ironically, the stuff they're usually dealing with that's all chaos and on fire would be addressed if they had process. So it's never lost on me, like, boy, you're putting out a fire with gasoline. It's like they're just not solving the root issue. They're just dealing with, the symptoms. The symptom is always some bit of chaos. And the root issue is there was never a process in the first place to actually address or reflect against.
That's another reason I love that. I'm going to stop you here because I want to really recap what we talked about up to now, because I think it's brilliant. So they're looking at it as a project, and I love the way you worded it, because it is true. it is something that they looked at we're going to do one day. I mean, I had a client, he owned an automotive shop, and he told me that it's been on his to-do list for the last 20 years. He knew he needed to do it, but he never got to it because it was looked as a project. So it is a business function, and it doesn't just end when you document some. There is then the revision and the review, etc. So absolutely 100% that.
And this is the thing, Ati. They'll do it as a project, and then people get pissed off that no one's using it. So guess what? They're never going to do it again. Hey, I did process, and it didn't work. It never solved our problem. We documented them. We put them on a shelf. Things didn't change around here.
Right. So that would be another reason, is because they've done it in the past and it failed because there was no followed by all.
There was no follow through.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was no allocation of resources, of time and people. And that's one of the things when you and I did a webinar together, and it was, I'm going to put that link to the webinar in the show notes, because I think it was a brilliant webinar, not because I did it, because we had like this, you and I really worked. You asked amazing questions, and that even brought more in terms of the how do you actually document? And one of the things that we talked about is that you have to allocate the resources in order to be able to send it out, right? Because that is absolutely a crucial step. I mean, I have a talk that I do on how to document processes and procedures. And we talked about how to start, how to map, etc. But then I said, you have to run it as anything else that you run in your company. It's kind of like, as your idea of your example of sales is perfect. It's kind of like you have a sales department, but you don't have a sales manager, or you don't have salespeople, and maybe some people in the organization from time to time do sales. It's going to fail. It's absolutely going to fail.
Yeah, we were talking, and we were being silly, but we would create a commercial for PlaybookBuilder, and it would be a bunch of people in a boardroom, and some guy would run in and say, I did it. What? I did sales. You did what? I did sales. I'm done. What am I going to do next? Just the insanity of thinking that way.
I can see it pop up on my YouTube when I looked at the video. You should actually do that. I think it would be fun. Yeah, what do another one that I find that when business owners say, I said, why haven't you done it? So, because they say, again, it's time. But I think at time, my comeback to a time is always, we always have time to things that are important to us, to things that are, that are top of mind, right? Because even now I can tell you, okay, Jon, I'm super busy, I can't do it. But what does it mean is that I didn't prioritize.
Priority. Yeah. That's very, very true. And I think also this idea of project goes back to it again. There's this sense of it being super manic. We're going to shut this place down and do process. No, you're not. You're never going to do that. That would even be a poor idea. The only time you get to do that is pre-revenue. Once your plane is up in the air, you don't have the luxury of shutting the store down. I mean, I've heard companies took COVID to do process. That's a great story. There was a restaurant I was talking to, and they did a great job of documenting processes because it was COVID. They didn't have anything else to do, but you don't get that opportunity. And so we have to figure out how to, fix the plane while we're flying it. And that means little bits at a time, slow walking it in. I think that's a key consideration. The other thing to weigh in on, another thing to consider. So if number one is reframing the way you think about it, it's not a project, it's a business function. The next thing is, actually, there are times when you can't document a process because you haven't decided yet. So that's a real one. I think the other one is sort of fog and mirrors, and I kind of go, hey, knucklehead, wake up. You can do this. Just start putting time on the calendar. But when a team hasn't decided yet how something ought to be done, they get a little reluctant about documenting process because they go, well, we don't want to bake this cake yet. We don't know if it's going to be chocolate or vanilla. We just don't know how we want it to be done. Of course, I still object because I don't believe that you can actually bring people together unless it's externalized in a graphic, like a visual. I like to look at a map and say, we're going to Ohio. These are the roads and the gas stations and the restaurants, plan it all out. And everybody looks at it and someone raises their hand and says, wait a minute, we don't have enough gas to get from here to here. We need to consider this. That's how you do make decisions. And so I think that mapping process, while that's a reasonable obstacle, I understand, we haven't decided yet. We can't We can't institutionalize all this stuff, but I still think you need to start with a documented process. Then you can test against it as a control. You can look at second and third order consequences. Oh crap, if we change this up here, it's going to roll downhill and be a problem for this group. All of this is manageable if it's not just a collection of things in silos, but actually a contiguous linear process going from the left side of a whiteboard over to the right. Like that's how I would prefer to do it and go, there it all is. Now,
and you know what? I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. And I'm so happy that you said that, because last week I had a meeting with a client, and one of their reluctancy of doing it. Actually they were on board, but then they had a team member that said, well, we are still a growing company and we don't have mature processes that we decided on. And my thing was like, well, you're never going to decide on it. What are you going to wait for, right? You have to document how you do it now. Or to your point, if the process really completely doesn't exist, then let's map it, because you obviously have an end goal in mind, like you were describing with the map. Brilliant. But oftentimes when people say that, what they mean is, this is the way we're doing it now. We are not sure that it is the most effective or most efficient way to do it. So what I say to that is, let's document current state, because then you can sit down and look, and everybody can have the agreement of, this is how we do it now. What can we improve? Or maybe we don't have to improve, or you can have a control, basically run control tests to see that if you're actually making an improvement, what effect does it have on the overall outcome, right? But if you don't do that, then you might be changing something that is actually working very well, or you do not know how to change it. So that will be,
that's it.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. You can't even talk about it effectively unless it all fits into a process or a system of processes. Yeah. I think that's a biggie. And I hear that once in a while. So number one, it's a business function, not a project. Number two, this idea of it's this,
the process is not ready, or we don't have a process for it yet, or the process is not mature. So basically, like waiting. So I think the idea is to waiting until the process is mature enough. But everything that we do is like when you and I talked about it too, like when you wake up in the morning, you have a process. How many of us, let's say if somebody drinks coffee or tea or whatever you do first thing in the morning, right? You go to the kitchen and you make something, you get a glass of water, you make a cup of coffee. I bet you that people make the same cup of coffee every single day. They don't do something different every single day, right? So we have a process. So if you really look at it, that repetition is the process that needs to be documented.
That's right. And I think the studies are 40% of your day is spent sort of unconsciously inside of a process. But becoming conscious competent means that you can tinker with it. It means that if you are consciously aware of what you're doing and you can look at it, you could say, where's the efficiency? Where are the gaps? Where's the friction? Like, you can't run a business that way. You can't run a business with your, but the deal is, and I think this goes back to earlier remarks, the tyranny of the urgent. There's often a fire that feels more important. And I get it. And I can't say it's not important. There's a fire. However, it's a fire because of broken processes. So you're going to have to deal with this one way or the other. Spend your life as a firefighter, or start, putting in the sprinkler system one room at a time. And that's going to be starting with process. So if number one is that, number one was business function. Number two is we haven't made decisions yet. I think number three is the visionary or the leader of the organization who says, profits is a trap. It removes innovation from my organization.
That's true. I heard it so many times, especially from creative. But you know what? I interview several on this podcast, marketing agencies, and the most successful ones are the ones that actually have processes. And those are the ones that are actually growing to become 60, 100, 250 employees. Those are the ones that the owner was able to actually get themselves out of the business. Mm-hmm.
That's right. Well, it's creative constraints. And I think there's a time and a place for innovation, but it goes back to earlier remarks. You cannot monkey with, tweak, or improve a process that hasn't been documented. And I could talk a visionary out of this one in 5 minutes. I mean, what do you want? Most of the time, what they want is less chaos and more growth. And those are functions of people being in the right seats and doing what they were hired to do and doing it exceptionally well. Those are all a function of driving, driving execution, and that's a function of process. And so they think it's a trap often because it feels like they're going to be stuck in a routine with no opportunity to lift their heads up and make changes. It's just the opposite. Their heads are down dealing with crisis du jour. Instead of actually being able to drive the horses, they're chasing the wagon. And so they've got to document processes, or instead of it being innovation, it's just solving one crisis after another. Often what I'll see happening is, we're going to launch this new product. Why? Because we can't seem to get the ROI out of the first one. Oh, so we're going to go do something new. That's not innovation though. That's clamoring for oxygen of cash flow. And ultimately what that sometimes can do is fatigue a team. People will quit because of stuff like that. Like, what the hell are we doing around here? What most books will tell you if you're trying to sell your business one day is, fire all those B and C products and projects, get rid of everything except the core of what you do, and become a guru in it, become a master of it. And so as opposed to getting distracted by bright and shiny objects, nail down what you do, be the best in the world at the one thing. There's so much benefit to it. And businesses like you're talking to, marketing firms that are growing or scaling, chances are they're not doing everything under the sun. They have a few core activities that they have just dominated in, and that's where they've gained so much traction. It's a proxy. I think the fear of being trapped by process is just a habit of putting out fires. So your visionary is an arsonist in this case. They're the ones who are actually starting the fires, creating up new things and cooking up new ideas, and they're a problem. And I see this once in a while, but less so. Most of the time, folks coming to my doorstep are, we totally want to do this, but here's the number one thing I hear. I said, there's 4 things. I said, they look at it the wrong way. It's really a business function, not a project. They haven't made decisions yet, so they don't feel like it's the right time. The leadership is like, oh, it's a trap, don't do it. But the one that I think is the most prevalent, and as I was thinking about this, I thought, wow, this is a really big one. They don't know what to do with processes once they have them. They fail to see the benefit. There's not a vision about how you'd use them. Now, if I was an NFL draft and I showed up and I got my playbook and there was going to be practice, I was going to go and I was going to be on the field and I would be expected to know the plays. And when they called them, I would be able to run them. I would understand what's going to be done with those processes, the plays in the playbook. But businesses actually lack the vision, I think. I'd love your feedback on this, but this is the thing I think is the biggest boogeyman. They don't know what the hell they're going to do with them. They get into this project mindset because they're like, well, check the box. I hope the magic fairies come and do something with them. I don't know what to do with them. And so they just kind of assign to this a mindset of, well, I'm thinking if we document them, it'll have some sort of benefit. But they don't know how to lever them all the time. They don't know how to use them in the organization to drive organizational change, accountability, a positive engagement culture. They don't know how to measure KPIs against the use of process. So it's just this wide open thing that needs addressed. I don't know how you would address it, Adi. First up, do you agree with me?
When I agree 100%, but you and I actually did that webinar on how to make sure that processes are followed by all. And I'm going to include that, as I said, in the link, because I think people should watch that, because the way, we covered in that particular webinar the specific steps on how to make sure it's being followed by all. And one of the most important steps are to make it accessible. And that's where PlaybookBuilder, it's not just a process documentation software or platform. It's a process implementation platform, because you have to have that constant communication It has to be alive. And by the way, just on that one, the number one thing that we discussed of making sure it's being followed by all, and that's what I tell all my clients, and I know you agree with me because we discussed that, is the mindset of the entrepreneur. Because you can, just like when you mentioned the point before in terms of that you feel like processes are blocking innovation or whatnot, if you still believe that, but you kind of like, your arm got twisted to actually start documenting the processes, and you don't really wholeheartedly are going to embrace that change where we are actually, this is part of the culture now, and those processes are going to be documented and implemented, and you are going to drive it, that's where the problem is going to come in terms of the implementation.
I think the remark about blocking innovation, I think that's a ruse. I think that's a false report from the client. Typically, that's like saying, oh, the price is too high. It's like, that's not really the issue. And in this regard, I think we don't know what to do with them, and I don't know how to do it. So instead of feeling stupid, I'll decide that I just don't like them in the first place and that they're a trap. But
as we talked and stepped in point number 3, in terms of like the idea of, if you're creative, you have that idea is being put out there that, processes are going to block your creativity, right? That's what we had the whole discussion.
Yeah, and it doesn't. It doesn't at all. In fact, it's just the opposite. Yeah. Absolutely. So those are the things I see. Business function, instead of a project, you have to reframe this thing. I think you need to map process in lieu of waiting for the fairies of perfection to come. You have to document process instead of waiting for perfect. It's the other way. You have to think about it the other way. Document first, and then as you're testing, as you're tweaking and improving, you've got something to reflect against. And then this issue of blocking innovation, that's just that's a quick conversation. Absolutely the opposite. And if you see organizations that run on rails that are really procedural, many times they're very innovative because there's a way that they do it and it doesn't break the organization apart. And the last one, I think the last one's still valid. It's like, what do you do with them? How do you institute it into your weeklies? Watch the webinar that we did. ID was brilliant. And it's I think the thing that most folks can't grasp. Since they can't, it's hard to get that appetite for doing it. They think it's going to be this awful hard slog. It's going to be full of pain and suffering. And then why are we doing this in the first place? I can't get my head around what would be the benefit. You have to get attached to the outcome before you'd even try. So once you get like, oh man, we have got to have that, you'll figure out how. Most entrepreneurs I know are pretty creative. They'll figure it out. They'll find the person, they'll find the budget, they'll find the time. They just have to have the will and see the vision. And once they do, it's like they'll just make it happen. But that's the first thing that has to happen is see it. You have to see why it would be a benefit to you.
Absolutely. And Jon, you've been so eloquent. I mean, the explanation is amazing. I'm going to write even a blog based on it because it's definitely, I think those 4 points are so crucial for entrepreneurs to understand. So then if you recognize yourself, if you realize that you're in one of those points, or maybe it's all of them applied to you, then, like when you actually mentioned it, like once you actually know about something, then you can do something about it. And that is a key thing. I mean, really assess yourself against those 4 points and be really honest with yourself and ask yourself, are any of those points exist in my organization, in myself, with my staff, what not? And then take the actions we just discussed in order to, overcome them, right? So there are resources out there. I'm going to put the resources for the webinar we did as an example. There are other resources that you can use in order to educate yourself on how to make it happen. And of course, you got to visit the PlaybookBuilder.com because that is a solution to the majority of those points. Jon, before we end, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say one last remark. I've seldom seen a small business really, really suffering because the competition were beating them. It's always friendly fire. So if you just want to get out of the chaos, and if you absolutely want a competitive advantage, do something the guy across the street would never get the time to focus or the energy to do. Document your processes and use them. You'd be surprised what an accelerant that is for growth.
I could not agree more. It's so beautifully said. And before I thank you and we end off, I definitely want to thank also the people that introduced us. So we got introduced by Ben Berman.
Ben Berman, who we still always give praise to every time we talk. Ben, giving a shout out to Ben.
Absolutely. And then I got introduced to Ben by Jess Morrell, so I'm going to give her a shout out as well.
Nice.
So thank you for introducing me to Ben, and then Ben introduced us, and that's what it is all about. It's those connections, and we'll definitely include their LinkedIn profile so you can check out who they are as well. And Jon, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. You are definitely going to come back and be a recurring guest, because our conversations about processes are, I find it very fruitful because we feed off of each other and we talk the same language, and I'm sure our listeners have really learned a lot out of it. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Always love seeing you. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.